Ever wonder what it's really like working at like one of these big tech giants,
Yeah.
like Microsoft?
Oh, yeah.
Today, we are going to be doing a deep dive into their performance review system
Okay.
and how it's been kind of changing,
Mhm.
especially with, all the recent moves to cut low performers.
Right.
It's something we can all relate to. Who hasn't had a performance review, right?
Absolutely.
But imagine the stakes when we're talking about a company worth like almost $3 trillion.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look, I think, at what happens when a company, known for its softer culture,
Right.
starts to get tough on performance.
Yeah,
And we've seen this happening, I think, across the tech industry lately,
for sure.
with companies like Meta, Amazon, Google, all making, similar moves as the hiring boom has kind of slowed down.
Yeah.
And profits become much more the focus.
Right. Well, the deep dive that we're doing today is based on an article from Business Insider titled Microsoft's Move to Cull Staff on Performance. And it starts with a story about a recently fired employee
Wow.
who says he was let go despite good performance reviews,
Oh, wow.
right as his wife was battling cancer.
Oh, no.
So, it's just a really stark reminder of like the human impact
Crazy.
these decisions have, even at a company like as big as Microsoft.
Absolutely. It really, this story really highlights how performance management decisions, even when, legally sound, can have, significant personal consequences for employees.
Right.
And it raises all sorts of questions about, the balance between a company's need to manage performance
Yeah.
and its responsibility to its employees.
And the employee in this story was, understandably shocked.
Yeah.
Especially with the immediate loss of benefits and things.
Right.
And Microsoft's response was basically that, terminations are rarely a surprise and COBRA coverage is available.
Right. Right. Which, highlights, I think, the legal side of things.
Yeah.
In that, in most cases, as long as firings aren't discriminatory, companies are within their rights to let employees go based on performance.
Right.
Of course, there are often severance packages involved,
Yeah.
which usually include a release of legal claims to protect the company from lawsuits.
Right. So how does this recent, wave of cuts kind of fit into like Microsoft's history with performance management?
Right.
Because, they used to be known for that system
Yeah.
called stack ranking,
rank.
where managers were forced to like rank their employees on a curve.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it created a pretty cutthroat environment.
It was a very controversial system.
Yeah.
To say the least. And it often, pitted employees against each other, prioritizing individual achievement over collaboration, and even sort of discouraging teams from, accepting good ideas if they didn't come from within the team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how, Jeff Bezos once called Microsoft's culture like a country club,
Right.
and there's clearly been a shift since then.
Yeah.
When Satya Nadella became CEO,
Yeah.
he really emphasized like a growth mindset philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Which was like,
Yeah, Nadella's approach, I think, really focused on continuous improvement, encouraging employees to embrace challenges and learn from failures. And, instead of ranking employees against each other,
Right.
the focus really shifted to collaboration and development.
Yeah.
And they even got rid of stack ranking and replaced it with a framework called model, coach, care.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a huge cultural shift.
It was a big one.
So how does that philosophy then translate into like their current performance review system?
Yeah, so the current system really centers around what they call the manage reward slider.
Okay.
It's basically a scale. It's 0 to 200.
Okay.
And it directly impacts how much employees receive in stock awards and cash bonuses.
Got it.
So hitting, certain numbers on the slider means bigger rewards,
Right.
while missing the mark can have, negative consequences.
Right. So there's a clear incentive like for employees to be top performers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what does that then mean for people who aren't necessarily at the top of the scale?
Well, it's true that, this system can make it more challenging to manage employees that are underperforming.
Right.
And while the growth mindset encourages development,
Yeah.
Microsoft also needs to ensure that everyone is contributing at a high level.
Right.
And that means having a separate process for managing out low performers.
Okay, so I'm curious about how that process works.
Yeah.
Is it simply a matter of like a manager deciding that someone isn't cutting it and showing them the door, or like how does that work?
Not quite. It's actually a more structured process than that.
Okay.
When a manager has concerns about an employee's performance,
Right.
they start by consulting with HR through an internal system.
Okay.
And then they're paired with an HR consultant who kind of helps guide them through the steps.
So there's a level of like oversight involved
Absolutely.
to make sure things are being handled properly.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens next?
So the HR consultant helps the manager provide formal written feedback
Okay.
to the employee stating that their performance is less impact than expected. And a 3-month performance management process begins.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means that after 3 months, the employee is automatically let go.
Not necessarily. Sometimes HR determines that the manager hasn't provided enough, coaching or documentation to show that the employee was given sufficient opportunities to improve.
Got it.
In those cases, it can actually take multiple 90-day cycles before someone is actually let go.
So how long does this process typically take?
Yeah.
Because the article mentioned it could be, quite a while.
Yeah, one manager in the article estimated that the average time to exit a low performer was around 7 months from the initial HR notification.
Wow.
And that's after a period of already, documented low performance.
Right.
So it's not a quick process.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't ways for employees to potentially delay things even further, right?
Unfortunately, there are. The article mentions, some employees try to use tactics like taking medical leave, potentially pausing, or even resetting the performance improvement process. Things like short-term disability could actually delay termination for 12 to 18 months.
Wow, that's a long time to be in limbo.
It is.
So we have this system with the manager rewards slider focused on like individual performance.
Right.
And then this separate process for managing out low performers.
Right.
It seems like a pretty complex system.
It is. And there's another layer to it called 1 year, 1 reward, where employees are basically judged solely on a single year's performance. It gives managers some flexibility in how they distribute rewards.
Okay.
But it also raises questions about, fairness and transparency.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do you mean by flexibility?
Okay, so let's say a manager wants to give really big rewards to their top performers.
Yeah.
They might have to lower the ratings of some, perfectly adequate performers just to free up budget space.
Okay.
It's been referred to as harvesting the budget.
Wait, so someone could be penalized even if they're meeting expectations?
It's definitely a controversial aspect of the system. One manager in the article even admitted that they, typically gave top performers raises by finding, employees who'd had, a less successful previous year.
Oh, wow.
And giving them zero or reduced rewards.
That does seem a bit unfair, especially if you're, meeting the expectations that are set for your role. So what does Microsoft have to say about this?
So Microsoft insists that this practice of harvesting the budget isn't company policy.
Yeah.
But it's clearly happening in some cases. Their official stance on 1 year, 1 reward is that past performance doesn't guarantee future rewards.
Okay.
And they believe employees should be judged based on their current contributions.
So it sounds like they're trying to walk a fine line between recognizing past achievements, but also holding employees accountable for like consistent performance.
Right.
It's definitely a lot to unpack.
It is. Yeah, it really does highlight the challenges of like creating a performance management system that balances, individual growth with the company's overall goals, especially in the tech industry where things move so fast.
Right. And speaking of fast moving, like how does this all play into the broader changes happening across the tech industry?
Yeah.
We've seen Meta cut around 5% of their workforce to kind of raise the bar on performance.
Right.
Amazon is cutting managers. Google is trimming jobs. It seems like Microsoft isn't alone in this shift towards like tougher performance management.
You're right. This is definitely an industry-wide trend.
Yeah.
The tech hiring boom has cooled off considerably, and companies are prioritizing profits over growth at all costs.
Yeah.
Plus, you've got the rise of AI coding tools that are changing the talent landscape.
Right.
And companies are really figuring out how to adapt.
Yeah.
And what that means for their workforce.
The article mentions that Microsoft's recent, performance-based cuts
resulted
in some pretty blunt termination letters for those let go.
Right.
Like basically, you didn't meet expectations, you're out, and your access is revoked immediately.
Yeah, the letters were direct.
Yeah.
But they did mention severance packages. But health benefits ended on the last day of employment.
Wow.
And the letters also stated that past performance and termination would be considered for future applications.
It makes you wonder, like, how Microsoft is reconciling this tougher approach with their growth mindset philosophy.
Right. It's a valid question.
Yeah.
Nadella's leadership team, they shifted away from forced rankings and implemented this system where managers have a payroll budget to distribute based on individual performance. So it means focusing on rewarding top performers while still, encouraging development for everyone.
Right. I can see how that would create some new challenges for managers to kind of figure out.
Yeah. And Kevin Oakes, he's CEO of the Institute for Corporate Productivity. He's worked with Microsoft on implementing, the growth mindset culture.
Oh, okay.
And he acknowledges, the system's good intentions. But also points out that, organizations, they need to stay lean and high performing. And sometimes that means letting go of employees who aren't meeting expectations.
Okay, let's get back to the managed rewards slider for a minute.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that it's separate from the process for managing out low performers.
Correct.
I'm still a little fuzzy on how that actually works.
Okay.
In practice.
So it's a multi-step process. When a manager has performance concerns about an employee.
Yeah.
They first consult with HR through this internal system called Ask HR at ANN.
Okay.
And then they're matched with an HR consultant who guides them through the process.
All right.
And they even bring in more experienced consultants for higher level employees or situations that are more complex.
So it's not just like a manager unilaterally deciding to let someone go.
Yeah.
There's a system of checks and balances in place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so the HR consultant helps the manager provide formal written feedback to the employee stating that they delivered less impact than expected. And then a 3-month performance management process begins.
Yeah.
So does that 3-month period always end in termination?
Not always.
Okay.
Sometimes HR determines that the manager hasn't provided enough performance coaching or documentation to show that the employee was given a real chance to improve.
Got it.
And in those cases, it can take multiple 90-day cycles before someone is ultimately let go.
I'm curious about how this 1 year, 1 reward concept affects the process.
Yeah.
Does focusing on a single year's performance make it harder or easier to manage out low performers?
Well, it puts a lot of emphasis on that 1 year's performance. And the fact that it's separate from the formal performance management process gives managers, some flexibility in how they handle things.
What do you mean by flexibility?
Okay, so let's say a manager wants to give their top performers significant rewards. They might have to lower the ratings of some employees who are meeting expectations. Just to free up budget space.
Okay.
It's a practice that's been called harvesting the budget.
That doesn't seem fair at all. Like if someone is doing their job well, why should they be penalized? Just because their manager needs to reward someone else.
You're right. It raises concerns about fairness and transparency. If employees feel like they're being punished for simply doing their jobs, it can erode trust and morale.
So what does Microsoft say about this practice?
So Microsoft claims that harvesting the budget is not company policy, but the fact that it's happening at all is concerning. Their official stance on 1 year, 1 reward is that employees are judged based on their current contributions. And past performance isn't a guarantee of future rewards.
So it sounds like a delicate balancing act. Trying to recognize past performance, but also holding employees accountable for their current work.
It is, yeah.
The article also mentions that Microsoft is focusing on becoming leaner. And more engineering driven. What did it say about this concept of good attrition?
So it's similar to what Amazon calls unregretted attrition. They're essentially looking at who is leaving the company voluntarily and analyzing whether those departures are actually beneficial to the company.
So if a high performer leaves, that would be considered like bad attrition.
Right.
Whereas if someone who is underperforming leaves, that would be good attrition.
Exactly. Yeah, they're trying to measure the impact of voluntary departures and see if they're aligned with their overall goals.
It seems like they're taking a lot of cues from Amazon.
Yeah.
The article also mentioned something about the builder ratio.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
So it's a metric that Amazon uses to analyze the ratio of software engineers, the actual builders, to non-builders like program managers and project managers.
Right.
And Microsoft is now tracking a similar metric called the PM ratio, which looks at the ratio of product managers or program managers to engineers.
So they're trying to increase like the number of hands-on builders, and reduce the number of people kind of in management or oversight roles.
Right. It's a trend we're seeing across the tech industry as companies focus on streamlining and optimizing for efficiency.
Yeah.
And Charlie Bell, he's Microsoft's security chief. He actually came from Amazon's cloud unit.
Okay.
He's brought this metric to Microsoft.
So they're actively trying to change that ratio. They are, yeah.
What are their targets?
So in Bill's security organization, the current ratio is about 5.5 engineers to 1 PM.
Okay.
And his goal is to reach 10 to 1.
Wow. So a pretty significant change.
Pretty significant, yeah.
It sounds like Microsoft is taking some pretty drastic steps to kind of adapt to this changing tech landscape.
Yeah.
Do you think they're at risk of like losing the growth mindset culture?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to talk about a growth mindset and quite another to actually live it, especially when you're making tough decisions about people's livelihoods.
Right.
So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how they manage this tension moving forward.
The article mentions that Microsoft has brought in some high-profile leaders from other tech giants like Google and Meta.
Right.
What was the thinking behind that? Well, they brought in people like former Google executive Mustafa Suleyman. And ex-Meta engineering chief Jay Parak.
Right.
You know, these are people who have experience navigating the challenges of performance management at other successful tech companies.
Right.
And it seems like Microsoft is looking for fresh perspectives and potentially a stronger point of view as they kind of refine their approach.
So they're not afraid to look outside for inspiration.
No.
And potentially shake things up.
Yeah.
Even further.
Yeah. It's a fascinating time, I think, in the tech industry.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how these changes play out.
What does all of this mean for the future of Microsoft's performance management system?
Right.
Like where do you think things are headed?
It is a fascinating time, I think, for sure, in the tech industry.
Yeah. It does feel like Microsoft is at a crossroads.
Yeah.
You know, they've achieved incredible success over the past decade.
Yeah.
Becoming like a leader in cloud computing and AI, and you know, they're worth nearly $3 trillion.
Right.
Making them like the third most valuable company in the world. But now they're facing a new set of challenges.
Yeah, their stock has stagnated recently with, you know, questions about their Copilot technology, the intensifying competition in the AI space.
Right.
And plus they're facing the same, you know, industry-wide challenges as other tech giants. You know, the hiring boom is over.
Yeah.
Investors are demanding profits, and AI is changing the talent landscape. So it's a lot to juggle.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see how these massive companies are adapting to these new realities.
Right.
Especially when it comes to like managing their workforce.
Yeah.
And balancing the need for performance with, you know, the desire to maintain like a positive culture.
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the numbers, right? It's about, you know, it's about people's lives and careers.
Yeah.
We started this deep dive talking about the employee who was let go despite seemingly good performance reviews. Right as his wife was battling cancer. And it's a reminder that these decisions have real human consequences.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in like the metrics and the strategies.
Right.
But ultimately, it's about people.
It is, yeah.
And creating a system that supports both, individual growth and company success is just incredibly complex.
Absolutely, and it's a challenge that every company is facing, not just tech giants.
Right.
As the nature of work continues to evolve, we need to find ways to measure and reward performance.
Yeah.
That are fair and transparent and ultimately beneficial to both the company and its employees.